We're going to go ahead and get started on the City Commission workshop for April 8th, 2024. I do want to say we are having some technical difficulties, but we are streaming live. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started on discussion on the update for the... Could I do that?
Is that up?
Oh, sorry.
And thank you for talking about turning up the volume. I spent all weekend yelling at kids and cheering for them at a baseball tournament, so my voice almost left me yesterday, but thankfully I'm able to keep going. So part of the agreement, what we're working on is doing multiple things. One of them is looking at current data and analysis, and that includes demographics and growth, transportation, as I mentioned, intersection analysis, really looking at where your major corridors are. We were told there's some trouble areas, looking at those, and are there some opportunities to do some alternatives in those areas, and then really ultimately reporting to you on some of your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and threats as you move forward as a community. There's a public engagement component to it that I mentioned that will have some stakeholders that your staff is working on, I think, and with you ultimately to put together a stakeholders group. There will be some outreach, and I'll go over that in a few minutes of what that plan is. But of course, we're open to your input on that, of how you'd like that to be done. And at the end, ultimately, the goal will be to have compile all of this data, compile all of this analysis, and really provide you with kind of a report, a summary report. But also with that is you have some changes coming up to your plan. There's been state law changes. You're required every 7 years to look at your comprehensive plan and look to see if you have data that we've collected here, and try to go over some of these high-level things that'll really help us drill down and talk to you about where you want to be, where you want to go as a community. So what was really interesting to us and jumped out, and talking to staff, they're kind of surprised about this also, is you have 77.5% owner-occupied housing, which is a pretty substantial number based on the county and statewide. And transportation routes generally create economic opportunities. So you do have, it presents its challenges in how to evolve, how to provide lower infrastructure costs, how to provide more services, how to provide more commercial opportunities and employment opportunities to the community. And your zoning, and not just is it a large percentage of single family, but it is also pretty restrictive in its specifically single family and very restrictive zoning districts themselves. And as I mentioned, you're at that 77% owner percent for other miscellaneous land uses, depending on how you break that down on those property appraiser use codes. And then you also have, as we mentioned, platted lots, right? The reality is you have thousands of 75 to 80 feet, 100, 125 foot depth lots throughout the community, and that challenge, that's there. That's a burden, and a lot of those are sold. A lot of those have changed hands. There's not a person that owns 30, 40, 50 of those lots to be able to combine, right? That's the challenge of a developer, is how do I get these parcels together to do something else, if that's what you want to do. But overall, it's about 2.8% of the city land is zoned for commercial, which is it's a low percentage. It's a very low percentage. So those are some challenges. Some opportunities, I called it missed here, but it may not be missed. Maybe something that we can circle back. You have somewhat of a decentralized and undeveloped activity center. I know you got a lot of activity that's going on there now. Obviously, new development coming. Apparently there's a hub, right, for a business area. There's a presence of some blighted areas that we could look at. And then you have some underutilized city nodes throughout your transportation network and throughout your city. And those are places that we can re-look at. What do you want to do? How do they become developed? How do they service your community and make it for a better overall flow? We put together a walkability and bus and transit routes, and we kind of overlay all those things to see what we're looking at and what kind of opportunities does the community have. And the summary of all that is that you have a very vehicle-dependent community. And you have a challenge with a grid network simply because you have a lot of environmental features like lakes, stormwater systems, a lot of other physical features that kind of prevent some of those grid networks from building out. So that, again, just the point to that is that's how you get to that 34-minute to work commute, essentially, is part of that reason. Not a lot of these walkability areas are in commercial and residential areas where there's not enough intensity or density of that residential to basically implement commercial that you have. And so that's the challenge there too, is how do you get those activity centers or commercial areas activated? How do you get them to be built out? So another challenge that you face is your existing commercial land use. You have the quality of the commercial land that's available. There's challenges in, again, the way that those parcels are separated, the way they're subdivided. There's areas along Holland and other places where there's very narrow and long, deep, I should say, parcels, and they're owned by multiple different people. And so it's very, again, hard to consolidate those. And they don't have very good frontage, or they're not near a good intersection. And so those are properties that are going to take a very long time to develop. And there's a lot of your commercial throughout the city that is like that. And that's part of the reason why some of this commercial has probably lagged behind. But your existing commercial is about 173.4 acres. You have 742 acres land zone commercial, which means, again, you have over 500 acres of vacant. But it's most of it, I'll be honest, is kind of that middle tier of quality, not the high end that all the developers are looking for. And then you do have some good spacing, though, in some of these areas, which I think leads us to a future opportunity to look at your codes and look at your comp plan and how do you activate those areas and create, whether it's job centers, commercial centers, service to the residents, but they are spaced somewhat appropriately 1 to 2 miles. So we were looking at the region, and one of the challenges that we deal with a lot of communities, and everybody wants a new town center. Everybody wants a activity center. Everybody wants new employment centers. And the challenge, what we have to look at for each community is also what is around you. And so a lot of times you can't put policies into place that then compete directly with something that's within close proximity. And so here what we're just showing you is the Orange City as an example. You can just see by the amount of red that they have. They have a substantial amount of commercial and a substantial amount of commercial along major corridors that are, I would call, more prime real estate opportunities for commercial development. And I guess, unfortunately, it's within close proximity to Deltona. So the larger regional scale type development that they get, that becomes kind of the gravitational pull, and it takes away from opportunities that you might be able to have. So some of the things we can look at as alternatives to that complement those and aren't directly competing with those, but can benefit everybody on both sides of I-4 and throughout this region. But another example is industrial lands. Is where do you put those industrial? Where do you put those business parks? And how do you address those employment opportunities? So that's really what this map is just trying to show, that the amount of red that you have on one side versus the other as far as the direct commercial. So we're not here to dictate to you, tell you what to do. Obviously, we're here to try to be a partner with you. I think the most important thing that hopefully you'll look forward to as we go through this process is engaging the public, getting the feedback from them of what they want the vision, what do you want as your vision for Deltona, and then trying to right-size those opportunities and those solutions to these issues. And they can be a variety of things, right? You can diversify land uses, simplifying zoning maps and zoning districts, encouraging, incentivizing local business components, enhancing urban design, public spaces. You have a lot of opportunities with your public spaces and trails, which we're really impressed with. Looking at complete streets opportunities, there's lots of, which create multimodal opportunities. And then diversifying housing. Those are kind of the general categories of way communities try to look at and picking and choosing different options from those general categories of how they go about creating a better sense of place and opportunity within your community. And as we get into this, we can talk about individual techniques within each of those, but those are generally the ways communities try to look at how to better their community. So I'm going to go over the engagement process here real quick. And try to go through what we've planned out. Now, obviously, the timeline on this is up to you. And a lot of it also depends. We get into these engagement processes, and sometimes the council or commission will say, hey, let's put a stop. We've heard some things. We want to revisit this. We want to slow it down. Sometimes they want to go faster. But really, this is a timeline for you to set. We have an outline here that we're suggesting. And if you want to alter that or pivot from some of those processes, again, that's up to you. But these are our suggestions right now. So in May, we're looking to do a vision charrette. And I'll describe that a little bit here in a second. June, we'll kick off an online vision survey. In July, we'll do some guiding principles charrette. August, we'll continue the online guiding principles survey. And again, making that live, making that active so that there's a continuous feedback from the public. And then by September, at some point, having vision statement and initiative priorities charrette to then conclude as part of our report back to you of what did all of that say. And the hope is at the end of all this, not will you just have a data and demographics and all these things, but you'll have set what your vision and your priorities are moving forward. That will be the foundation to your updating of your comprehensive plan as kind of a second step to that, which obviously, as many of you are probably aware, once you do that, then you can do your land development codes to implement that comprehensive plan, those vision. But we would like to walk out of here with you having your set vision and your set priorities moving forward so that there's no question of where you're going once we get there. Now, there's some other options of how to do this, but the way that we've created this is, I'll go back to this timeline. So in May, identify community vision, discuss community values, needs, concerns related to a community vision. July would be the guiding principles, which would be essentially to confirm the community to the community or from the community, the key guiding principles needed to achieve that community vision. September is the community priority initiatives, which would be prioritize the critical initiatives that will implement the guiding principles and accomplish that vision. Now, each of the workshops will feature 3 to 4 meetings. There should be a daytime, an evening, and then an elected leaders workshop. We'll try to do those all in multiple days if possible, or a singular day if possible, or over a couple days. And then hopefully these meetings will occur with over a 1 to 2 day period. And so we do that one for efficiency for us and your staff, so they're not, and then also because of the timeline, we want to get back to you and get this thing kind of wrapped up so that you have your vision, your guiding principles, and then you can move forward with a lot of other work that you have left to do. And then so moving forward, we will follow this meeting schedule, unless, of course, once you discuss this and we get into that part of it, you feel that you need to change that timeline for whether it's season, whether it's other reasons. We can talk about that. So I touched on it a little bit. So what we've done to date, in addition to some of this data collection and looking at what makes the community tick, so to speak, as far as how does it function and operate, what does the land use look like, we've evaluated your comprehensive plan for language that is inconsistent, maybe inconsistent with changes of state law. This is required every 7 years. This is the beginning to your issue identification. I'm happy to tell you the evaluation results where there's just a few minor changes to your goals, objective policies. That's what GOPS means. And a lot of that's related to the solar facilities that they changed a couple years ago. We will continue that process during and after the public engagement component that I just mapped out for you, because we want to make sure that there's not other issues that the public doesn't bring up that we would miss. I always encourage communities to separate comprehensive plan updates because of visioning things from your legislative requirements, but we want to take the opportunity to take in what the visioning part of it is, obviously, at this point at the same time. That way we can make sure that everything's married. But you don't do the comp plan update until you fix the legislative stuff. Does that make sense? A lot of communities used to do them all at the same time, and then it got confusing what this update was for. Was it for a legislative reason, or was it for because our community want type reason? I always recommend making those two separate. And then after the public input process that we talked about, we'll evaluate your opportunities that may be included for post-visioning, as I just said. And again, that'll be all compiled in your kind of master report and recommendations that we provide to you. So that's where we're at now. We're in the middle of all this, obviously, and we're looking to kick off this public engagement component. And I'm happy to hear from you or discuss other options or what you'd like to do moving forward. We think there's a lot of opportunity here in Deltona. I think a lot of it is going to be driven, obviously, by yourselves and the public. What do you want to be when you grow up, so to speak? And what vision can you set for the next 20 or 30 years? But the biggest goal, I think, that if we can accomplish not just getting that part done, but is helping you build champions for that vision and helping you build champions to carry this forward. Consultants come in and we help, but we go away. This is your community. So we want to help you build those champions that are going to help implement this vision that we come up with you over the next 20 years. And so that's where I think we can help you the most. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this. I know it's high-level stuff, but we're just trying to give you a big picture view of where we're at and what we're doing.
So because we have a couple people that are connected via Zoom, we're going to go ahead as usual, start with them. Mr. or Commissioner Harriet, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns?
Yeah, I've got a couple things written down, but I'd like to just hear what everybody else has first.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Okay. Is Troy online already or no? Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead to Commissioner McCool, then Vice Mayor Jody Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions that I have, and I know that we're going to get into what we're going to do, the rabbit holes later, okay?
Okay.
But I want to make sure that these are, is your SWOT analysis done? Is this the representation of the SWOT analysis, or is that an ongoing thing?
That's an ongoing thing. We're not done with the transportation component, which also builds into the SWOT, and I think it's important to hear from the community to be able to finish that. That's a critical part to that.
Okay. And I'm not trying to be condescending, but I'm speaking short form. The SWOT analysis is down here when it talks about the current data and analysis. SWOT is just short for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Right.
So when you hear us talk about SWOT analysis, that's what that is. So in this analysis right here, are we going to quantify what the LOS is, level of services are for this area? Because we speak a lot in the community about having, when we are doing growth and development, when we're approving developments, we talk about levels of service.
Right.
And we have never quantified what those LOSs are. According to whose standards? What is the standards for LOS in a community? And we need to address that because we have serious concerns regarding educational concurrency at this time. There's an incomplete formula for educational concurrency, which builds a healthy community. We also don't have a rock-solid standard that we follow. What is LOS? We know we need more deputies here, right, because of traffic concerns, because of our compounding traffic issues. But what is that LOS? And have you looked at that as part of your SWOT analysis so far?
That part, no. Those two items are, I would say, at least with the deputy and police and all that, is a little bit outside of the traditional planning component, but it's a very vital part. I think that's a great point. No, we have not looked at that as far as this. I think it's important that's a great point, that this process essentially that comes out of this process. You need to incorporate that into your comprehensive plan, that we need to evaluate this. We need to set a standard. And I'll give you an example. The fire is not one that's traditionally has a specific standard. A community we work with worked really hard with us to figure out a calculation, figure out a formula that this is what our level of service is going to be for fire response times. And it was all based on their ability to track, monitor, report, and record the response times and what they were going through. And so because they put that in place and put those systems in place, they were able to create a formula and a level of service for that, and they adopted that as part of their comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So those are critical parts that if those are necessary, we need to eventually have them in the plan that, one, you do that, two, you set that level of service, and three, you follow up and continue that.
Second of all, have you produced or do you have in mind or have suggestion what a healthy standard of mix is for our community? As you know, we're a predominantly bedroom community. Has it been suggested? What is the healthy mix that our community, I know that this is an ongoing process, but you must have some 30,000-foot view, really, of what that level is and where we're falling behind. Do you already have that in mind moving in?
Yeah, I mean, there's general percentages. You generally want, a lot of communities strive, I've worked with, have ended up striving for that 70 to 30% mix. But ultimately, your retail and commercial component is going to come down to a demand on a per capita basis. And that demand goes up as your population goes, per capita goes up, as your population goes up. It seems kind of counterintuitive. You would think it'd be consistent, but if you're a 40,000 population, you grow to 100,000 population, that per capita demand that you have need goes up. So you'll go from, 50 square feet per person, you get to the 100,000, you might need 90 square feet per person. So it's an ever-growing number because of the way that the commercial and retail work. The more people, the much more square footage you need.
And I ask you that because it leads to my next question here, is that in our development, especially we are, for me, I think overly saturated with the residential market here. People have a right to develop their land, I understand that, but what we're trying to, the matrix, the healthy matrix that we are trying to reach requires no further residential development. Sorry, that's my own opinion. I'm not an expert, but I'm just telling you by what I see. So will you be looking at, or could you look at, based on our heavy residential population and moving into this as part of our comprehensive and land use, net versus gross, when we come down to how we zone, I would like to see that discussed, because if you look at a full map of our area, we have so many water bodies and so many of our residential are planned on gross as opposed to net, which means that they can expand really, really close to wetlands and use property that really shouldn't be. And I understand what the developer game is and why they use it. I understand why we have it, but I also understand unique to our development package here in Deltona that needs to be looked at. So I'm making the request that we do that based on what our population is, because we're going to be dipping into that ratio of what a healthy community should look like and how we should plan moving forward. So will that be included?
So these are all suggestions to be included. Yes, so I don't know that we have that to analyze that specific number or that component. I think what you make is a good point in that those are all pieces that need to come out of this process that then become part of your vision and your guiding principles, right? One of your guiding principles may be to enhance wetlands and protect and flood-proof your community. You only do that through restoring and protecting a floodplain, not just the wetlands. The floodplain is an important part, as I think you've all learned. And those are many communities struggle with that. They want to do that, and then they can't get the votes for it.
Right.
Because development can impact those things. They don't want to go as a higher standard to what a state regulation may be. So that's going to be not headbutting, but that's going to be a critical point for you as a community to decide, is that what you're going to do moving forward, and what techniques will you do, or are you going to go status quo, so to speak. And many communities I've worked in, they want to, they get there, they almost get there, and then at the last minute, for whatever reason, they back off that.
Last question is, at what point in this, is this an independent process for each commissioner to go over with staff? But, our comp plan needs to be gone over line by line, because we have very conflicting land use codes based on what our future land use is, based on what our conservation points are, based on what our transportation and education. I mean, you said it in this report right here. We don't have bus stops that go to critical points that we need to, right? But yet we keep passing development that says we have this. We talk about walkability, and we don't have walkability per se in our community. So I just want to make sure that these are brought up as we go through the process, and I know that you will understand what's important to our community and what's important to each commissioner regarding density and how we continue to develop. Because if you look at our you've done this analysis here. We have only so much precious building space left. So I just want to make sure that that's, you know what I mean?
They're all great points. I think the challenge, you mentioned you have enough residential. Well, the challenge is, but it's spread out so far, right? So the massing that you need and the intensity that you need to then achieve something other than, a gas station or fast food or something of that nature is more population in a concentrated area. There's different ways you can achieve that without ultimately going more population. You can do transfer development rights. You can, taking down platted lots and replacing them in a better place to then create commercial and other opportunities and business opportunities. There's lots of ways to do that. You don't have to go more population necessarily, but really you need more concentrated areas technically to be able to grow these commercial opportunities. And you're absolutely right about the connectivity. There's a difference between sidewalks within a subdivision that's isolated, that may be walkable, but that subdivision is 3 miles from anything else, right?
Yep.
And there's no sidewalks along the outside network,
Yep.
there's no bus stop. That's different. Those are two different walkability conversations.
And I think that that's what the goal is, because we have serious concerns in the community regarding urban sprawl.
Yes.
Because although it should be quantitative, it's subjective, based on what the law tells us that we can agree to or not agree to. And you brought up a very important thing, which is one of the rights of developers is that we can trade we can trade outside circuitous property for property that is inside the city, change those zonings and be more consistent about what we're really trying to, because everybody says we want to compact our development. But yet we have developers that are trying to develop communities outside where it's 1 to 5 acres or 10 acres, and they're trying to put, 50 homes on an acre. I'm being facetious, but
No.
you get the point.
Yes.
And talking about that it's okay for our community to our leaders to work with these developers to perhaps trade land so that we can save this and develop this into more sustainable footprint. So thank you for bringing that up.
And I didn't even touch on annexation.
Yeah.
Right? Or some communities are facing and talking about de-annexation, right? So those are all components that are a critical part to your future. Where are your boundaries going to be? What do you want to control? And it never fails that cities and counties disagree on what type of development should occur.
Yep.
And so those are having that relationship and building those relationships to make sure everybody's on the same page is ultimately you have to do. And you have to sustain that no matter who's here in the seat, no matter who's here in the director or the planner or whoever. Those are big challenges that you have to continue to work at.
And Deltona is unique in the fact that we have historical areas around us that we need to preserve and that we don't need to cityfy. We have enough close population, and trying to annex these cities, these people moved out where they moved for a reason, you know what I mean? And I think that we need to be more cognizant of that. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Vice Mayor Jody Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll go down a rabbit holes then, so you don't. And I agree with everything you're saying, Commissioner McCool. But like all this, and I love your presentation, but we've done this over and over and over. And how much of this we've done in the city? Nothing. We just keep doing it over and over. I want to get everything discussed about the rest of it. How many houses we're going to allow on an acre, going after these big developments and stopping them from just taking over in our city, sucking up every bit of land. I mean, we need to go over all the stuff. I mean, I personally, in my opinion, I think we shouldn't be building no more than 4 houses per acre and go back to the way it used to be instead of cramming, like you say. That's where it's getting us. I mean, we don't hold anybody to accountability. We just let people do stuff. And like I said, I'm not going to have to hear for your presentation, but a lot of this stuff, not against you, but a lot of this stuff, we've seen it. We've seen the comparisons of what it is here, the people at work, the average income. We've seen all that. We've been through this time and time again. We want to change it so developers don't keep taking advantage of us. And that's what they do. They come here, they build a spot, they put 400 houses in 12 acres of land, and that's just not right for the people that live there next to it that were supposed to be living there with 4 acres, and that's where they've been with their whole family for the last 30 years. And all of a sudden, a developer puts 18 houses in his front driveway. This is the stuff we need to fix. I understand we have to go through, we have limited land left, but if we don't change what we currently have, these developers are going to come in and still take advantage of the little bit of land that we do have left. That's the stuff I want to fix in the city. Thank you.
Commissioner Villa-Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. So one of the things that we also encounter in the problem is we have really big, important roads and streets here in the city of Deltona, but there's nothing we can do about it because they belong to the county. So if you can include that in your research and all that needs to be updated with sewers and gas lines. We have restaurants that have come to see those sites. There are some empty spaces in 2 that I'm thinking of the top of my head right now, and they turned away because there's no sewer and there's no gas lines. And in order for them to continue building there, they have to pay for it themselves. So if we can get the county to help us in, upgrade those areas to bring in more businesses to these roads and these streets. Not that there aren't any nearby. They are. It's just trying to get them to these areas that are a distance from where they are right now so that we can bring in new businesses in. For example, Deltona Boulevard has very sore sites, empty properties, empty land that nobody will come and build on because of the lack of sewer, lack of infrastructure, lack of gas lines. So if we can include that in your plan, it would be great.
So if I could go down that rabbit hole with you. So the process generally is, that may be a theme that comes out of the discussions, whether it's public engagement or your input and all that. And so that becomes potentially one of your principles of whether it's infilling infrastructure in quasi-developed areas, is that a priority? Or is that where your infrastructure, your money is going to go in order to encourage that and incentivize that? Those are all the types of things that we're looking to get out of the public and get out of you. And then that becomes the bigger picture that you got, the framework that you gets back to, that then you can turn around and re-rank, so to speak. I don't want to take it down to just a ranking, but prioritizing what is the most important, what is the number one way we can help our community, if it's infill infrastructure and finishing that last mile, so to speak, so that those pieces that are already there can then develop, that could be a priority number one. Then it's the expansion of other areas, right? So all of this can work together on that. It's ultimately going to be up to you of what you prioritize that as. And that's a good idea as an area of a focus that could be coming out of those principles.
Thank you, Mayor.
Here's one of my big concerns is when we're doing this, right? Like the Vice Mayor said, we've done this a couple times. Not us specifically, but others that have come before us. And it's great to talk about it, but we're not putting it into practice.
Correct.
When we get people here that are continuously asking for change of a zoning, obviously there's a problem with their land use codes, right? Mm-hmm. My concern with when we start going down this rabbit hole is I want us to put a big emphasis on protecting our residents from flooding, from stormwater. I want to make sure that when new development comes in, because I've seen some of the things that other cities are doing. In their codes, it requires certain things. Mm-hmm. It can range from the type of asphalt they're putting down to the way they build their housing, where it helps that development not flood, right? So that's my number one priority, mine personally. The other thing is I think you said we're like 70-some% residential. Mm-hmm. We really don't have amenities for our residents. Our residents are taking their dollars across the bridge, right, whether it's to Sanford, Daytona, what have you. I like us to concentrate on seeing how we can bring more amenities for our residents, whether it's restaurants, what can we do to our codes to make it more attractive to them while also respecting the fact that I don't want my residents to be flooding or to be getting in trouble. And I'm going to agree with most of the people that are saying we probably don't need to be building more and more housing. You know, there's things out there that people are doing now, like mixed use. That's a way to kind of get the best of both worlds. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the concerns I have, but the flooding issue is a big concern for me because I've seen it firsthand, you know, what some of the residents have struggled with. And time again, it's not the fault of anyone specifically, but it's almost like everything falls on deaf ears.
Understood.
Commissioner McCool and then Vice Mayor Jody Lee.
Yeah, I'm thinking out loud here, and I meant to ask staff about this earlier, but before I forget, I want to go back and revisit the law. I am cloudy on it regarding moratoriums. We can do them ever so often. Thank you, Jessica. But I want to revisit that because we did our moratorium in September of 2022, and I think that it's every couple years we can ask for a 6-month moratorium. So moving forward, I want to think about that. And I want it also in here because I've gone over our comp plan and our future land use a lot. And there are a lot of conflicting things as we rewrite this. So I want to make sure that the opportunity is there for community input and elected input regarding line by line on our comp plan, because there are some conflicting things there in our policy objectives and goals. it's written, but we have changed a lot even since this was done in 2018. You know, and we haven't had in Deltona, we haven't had like a watershed study since 1995 done here. And I requested the county that Deltona be one of the first cities that are included on doing this watershed study. We've had a lot change since this, and I want to make sure that our community understands while we're doing this, when we're talking about our SWOT analysis here, that if we, in building a healthier commercial base, that we have to incentivize because of how we are laid out. We're a beautiful town, but it's going to take incentivizing for commercial growth, and in doing that, it's not to be confused with corporate welfare, right? We have to incentivize to get here, because the fact of the matter is, because we're so heavily residentially populated, where do we get all of our tax money? Where do we get our extra stormwater? Where do we have to always go? To the residents' coffers, because we have so little business to support that other tax base. So when we're doing these meetings, I want some of those points to be very germane, because our taxpayers are exhausted. Our taxpayers are so exhausted. And the first go-to is that the city, the municipality, is overtaxing the people and being wasteful. And we cannot develop a good land code without keeping that in mind to relieve the taxpayer of some of this burden, because we're going to be coming back asking for stormwater money. We don't have any. County's not giving us any. State's not giving us any. Everybody's pulling money, and the responsibility falls down on the municipality. So I just want, as we move through, for us to talk about that. We can't have it both ways. We can't let the taxpayer, the residents, enjoy lower levels without incentivizing a commercial base to get here, get established here, and us supporting them here in order to relieve that. And that sometimes includes incentives, because there was a lot of question about Amazon incentives, but there's a reason that we do that. We're almost done paying that off. So I just want this educational cycle to be included as we move along, because truly this comp plan needs to be gone over line by line and corrected with pen and paper, the way that it applies to how we are today, with the flooding that we've had today, with the lack of educational concurrency today, you know, with the amount of public safety that we need funded today. So you as the consultant, and they're right, we've had strategic sessions that have gone, we spent money on consultants, and here the freak we are. We're still sitting here stuck in the rut. So I want to make sure as a commission that we keep pushing forward on this. This is different. This is an actual land use, comp plan here as opposed to a strategic session. We have strategic planning burnout because we keep getting presented and we don't have a way to move forward. You know why? We don't have a roadmap. Do you know why? Because we've not sat and taken a look at these maps and said, we want this area to be this. Right. We would like this area to be that, with the public input. So I'm telling you, reality speaking, this is where we are with our land development code. It needs to be stripped back to the very basic step. That's why I asked for these maps to be put out here tonight and given out, so that we can understand how Deltona is laid out and how we wish for Deltona to be laid out. Right. So,
I think
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Those are all very good points, if I may touch on that, just because as a planner doing this for, 23, 24 years now, there's not enough comprehensive plans that bring all of that together. And a lot of times no disrespect to other departments, they think it's a planner's document. It doesn't apply to public works. It doesn't apply to utilities. And it needs to. It's how you put yourself on the hook from a capital expenditure, a financial investment, and it's the ground. It's the roadmap, as you mentioned, to how you do all those things. Whether it's a park and trail master plan that's going to be redone and updated every 7 years, whether it's a utility master plan, you got to put those things in your comp plan from a financial purpose to plan for it, but also to remind everybody that these things need to work together. They're not all independent silos. They have to work together. You're absolutely right.
And when I say that, I truly mean there needs to be a thorough dissection as applicable today on this and post haste that we need to forward this as a commission because, again, our taxpayers have burnout. Our residents have burnout. Our residents have burnout in the fact that we talk about doing, we want to do amazing things, but we're trying to go to a corner in a round room,
Right.
you know, and we all have exhaustion from that. We're tired of that. Our community is tired of that, and I think that this is a great time for input as to, people say, oh, we want more businesses. Well, where do you want them? We need to refer to these maps as they are currently laid out and how we want our city to look, and that needs to be a huge part of that. We have infrastructure that's failing that we are trying to scramble for money to pay for. We are getting ourselves together so that we can make better presentations to FDOT and to the state. You know, we need this money to the county. We need to be included in these studies. And in order to do that, we have to move forward with a solid land use plan. You know, we were just Tuesday night date material for so long, but we're a Friday and Saturday night weekend date city now. We have a lot of invested in our city, our community, our residents invest a lot in, and so I agree with what the mayor says and what the commissioner says. We need to get Deltona Boulevard on sewer. It's there, and we need to find out what those stumbling blocks keep being so that we can start out. So I just want to see all of those addressed. And most importantly, for these residents right here, these taxpayers, they are very conservation-minded. Mm-hmm. We are very conservation-minded, and we need to move forward with that also. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've heard that loud and clear.
We're going to go to Vice Mayor Jody Lee, and then Commissioner Harriet is also raising his hand. So, and by the way, for the city clerk, Mr. Commissioner Shimkus is on. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. All of that, I agree with everything everybody's saying. We also need to worry about the one thing, especially after last month, fixing it where developers get permission to do something. If they don't do it within so amount of time, just let them start over. Like that whole traffic study, the TIA, we got the whole fiasco. That needs to be fixed sooner rather than later. And I'm glad, Commissioner Vasquez, you brought up the thing about the places, the scenery places to come to. You brought up taxpayers' money. I guess it'd be the time I ask Glenn, can you get Tetra Tech on the meeting, next Monday night meeting? And the reason why I'm bringing this up, I tried to ask you before, and it has to be brought up in front of everybody, and I can't do a vote because it's a workshop, but we need to get Tetra Tech in here and explain to us what happened over at our one boat ramp in our city, find out who's responsible, and make them pay for it, and have our insurance company go after this company. So we need to get this done. It's not even really up for debate no more. We've been asking about it for 3 years, or we have for the last year and a half anyway. But we need to get to the bottom of who's responsible. Everybody wants to sue our city. It's time we go after somebody else instead of having taxpayers pay for that mistake. That's my opinion.
Commissioner Harriet.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Green, you mentioned that we have a residential commercial retail split of somewhere roughly 70, a little more than 70%. Ideal would be 70-30. Is that ideal split attainable in the city of Deltona with the current land that we have available?
I'd have to do some calculations, but I think when you talk about, that's really about tax dollars, right? Not just percentage land area. You would like, ideally, a lot of communities are targeting that 30% number is where the tax dollars are coming from. And so it's not 90-10, it's a 70-30 revenue side. That somewhat translates to square footage, depending, but it's harder to get higher tax dollar values on commercial if you have low floor area ratios, as an example. it takes a lot more acreage to get to that number. Does that make sense? So the percentage of land is not always related to the percentage of tax revenues. And the more intensive commercial you allow, the higher the revenue per acre you get. So you need less acreage. So it just depends on your policy.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we need to start looking at redevelopment of existing to commercial and possibly even maybe incorporate some redevelopment of residential along some of our more heavily used thoroughfares.
Yes.
To kind of get some of that shift that residential to commercial.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. If you finding the appropriate place in relation to your infrastructure, in relation to your transportation network and options, but also with respect to your existing neighborhoods, that is always a very, very hard thing to accomplish. You obviously can affect those transitions with landscape buffers and screening and other things. Most communities don't think that's enough, right? So you've got to, through the comp plan, set the policy of where and how, and then your land development codes is exactly how they develop, right? And the manner in which they develop. I think, well, as an example, I believe your commercial category is 0.55 FAR, which is pretty low compared to most communities. They're usually in the 1 or higher FAR, floor area ratio term. So that's the amount of square footage you can build per acre. That basically, your suburban public shopping centers and those things are in the 0.3, 0.4 range. So that's what you're essentially limiting your existing commercial to now. So there's things that you can do in the right place, in the right manner, increase that to allow that tax revenue to increase per acre on a per acre basis.
What I'm hearing is it's possible. We can do the difficult today. The impossible, we need to plan for next week. But I'm hearing that we can do it.
You can do it. The conflict is always in the I don't want more density, but if you have more density in an appropriate manner, and it looks good, and it feels right, and it's scaled well, are you okay with that, right? That's always what I think communities forget about. I've done these preference surveys with communities all the time where we put up a picture of an apartment complex, just as an example, and I say, pick out the one that you think you'd be okay with, and never fail, they pick the one that's the highest density. They just don't realize it's the highest density because it looks good, and it blends in with the neighborhood, right? So there's ways in your plans to force that component and require that make it easier to allow some of these mixture of uses. And you have to have volume to be able to get the higher end stuff, to be able to get more commercial. You have to have mass, both residential and commercial appeal.
And to kind of follow that up, one of the other things that I want to bring up and make sure that we incorporate is we do have a stormwater study or basin study for one of the significant basins within the city of Deltona. And I want to also make sure that we're incorporating some of those stormwater features that would be required as features for development and for the residents, and make sure that when we're doing that study or we're doing this the update that you guys are looking at, we incorporate what's to come with the basin study as well. Right. And so that we can take some of those densities that normally residents would not appreciate, and we can turn them into something that would be appreciable.
Sure, that's a good point. And it's too often, I think I made the reference earlier, that you do a watershed study and then nobody looks at it or touches it for 10 or 15 years because you didn't put in your plan that you need to regularly update this. You need to update and invest in a model. You need to make development, incorporate their plans and their development into that model, and it needs to show that there's no harm and all that. Those things, you got to start moving in that direction with the size you are. It's time to do some of it. But if you don't put it in the plan as you're going to regularly do that and maintain that, then it gets lost on a shelf somewhere and people forget about it.
Exactly. And then I'd also love to see how we can incorporate some of these multimodal strategies and with the plan, and as well as complete streets, and maybe kind of increase the walkability around some of the smaller community hubs within the city.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shimkus, did you want to add anything to that?
No, thank you, sir. I'm good for now.
Okay. I guess the only other comment that I personally have is, can we make sure that we have consistency, please? Because, I mean, you can go to whichever corner you want. We have the specific Deltona sign that's one color. You go to another one, we have like a like an earth tony color. Then there's another one that looks kind of like it came from Miami Vice. We need consistency in the city really bad. And it's weird because when you go to the planning and zoning department, they have these 3 modules, I guess that was from 2012 or something like that they were going to present. I'm not sure from when it was, but they had beautiful ideas. But again, it was brought up. Right. It was never implemented. So, yeah.
Do you have anywhere written that says our branding and appearance and all this will be consistent?
That's what I would love to
Right.
see as consistency.
So adopting that policy is a critical
Thank you
part.
for bringing up branding.
Yep.
Say that again.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Green for bringing up branding. That's something that's noticeably lacking across the city.
Commissioner McCool.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. Exactly. Consistent branding, planning, and uniformity when it comes to development also, right? And as we move forth, the flooding problem that we have in Deltona is very real, and we need a hard stop, and I mean a hard stop at allowing. I understand what code says. I understand what state standards say. I understand how we're supposed to be planning, but I also understand most, and I'm going to use that word generously, most developers don't go out of their way to screw people over. But it happens because we don't demand in our comp plan, in anywhere in our development code. As of today, if you move in and you want to do development in Deltona, you need to find an alternative for impervious surfaces, first of all. It's the first thing that we can do. Things like we've cut down all of our natural vegetation, water oaks, palmetto, things that naturally suck water up when that happens. We have more flooding that way. Nobody can tell if it's nature versus nurture, at least they don't want to. But we know that development has a big deal to do with this, and so I want that to be number one on our list as we talk about mitigating storm and water. It's on everybody's mind, life and property, and we have to set those standards moving through in our development, and it has to be included in our comp plan. It has to be succinctly stated, or otherwise they're going to find a way to circumvent that process, and we have to demand that in Deltona, that these more rigid standards. We can't tell a developer how much to build, like they have a right, but we can change our zoning expectations, and we can also change how they development. If we require them to have 50-foot buffers instead of 25-foot buffers, the state says that we can do that, but it's that we have to make that a priority, because right now, number one on everybody's mind, taxes, how much it's costing them to live in Deltona. Number two, the cleanup we're having to do, cleaning up our infrastructure. We have failing infrastructure. It's a fact. And number three, which is probably, I have to say it's there with number one and number two, is flooding, because it's cost us a lot. It's cost us a lot in our relationship with our residents, because it feels like we failed them, and we need to, as we move forward, make sure it's number one on our list. And I think that's why you see so much passion from this whole commission here, because we are exhausted for our residents, and we need to remember that moving forward. They need to be involved every single step along the way, because they are who have lost the most here. And that's who we work for. So as you move through, please keep that in mind, that we are an exhausted community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
As a professional floodplain manager, I can fully respect and understand where you're coming from. And that's something we try to, sustainability, we're big on sustainability components. We try to encourage that in communities. But like I said, a lot of times those types of things die at the 11th hour. So I'm hoping, it sounds like there's a commitment here, at least.
We want it written. We
Yes.
want it written in concrete. We want it enforceable. We want it legislated here in this community. We're serious about it, and I just want you to keep that in mind. You see
And
the
that's
whole
good to hear.
commission shaking their
Yep.
head. That's
And
where we want to go.
That's
Thank
wonderful
you.
to hear. Thank you.
Before we go to public comment, I did want to see if, Marcia, did you know the answer to that question that Commissioner McCool asked? How long before we can go for another residential moratorium?
No, not off the top of my head, I do not.
When you do get that answer, can you make sure we
Sure.
all get the?
Yes,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much. Joyce, can we please go to public comment?
Lori, I believe it's Warnicki, sorry.
Good evening. My name's Lori Warnicki, and I've been a resident of Deltona since 1982. Built my first house in Deltona. Why does Deltona keep rezoning? And when did low density become 6 houses per acres? Trees and brush are a natural stormwater system. With what is being discussed, the acres and acres will be mowed over for more houses, and the natural stormwater system will be destroyed, which will lead to more flooding. I am proud of the fact that 77.5% are homeowners that live in Deltona are owner-occupied. This will soon change with the amount of development that's being proposed. Lennar started a Vineland Reserve, and 98 of those houses are rentals. And I'd like each and every one of you to have one of these lists. This is just the information on parking. I have information on crime. I have information on ingress, egress, the neighborhood. This is the parking. People can't get past. And now you want to develop more. How many more are going to be rental units? Parking is an issue. When is the madness going to stop? Deltona has been a bedroom community forever. I was looking forward to a commercial development along 415 where we could go to restaurants. It's a mile down the street from my house. I'd love to be in a golf cart, jump in a golf cart the way City of Sanford's done. Along 415, leave the residential people alone. Quit piling houses on top of houses. And what can I do with these? Because I want every one of you.
If you can just give it to the clerk. Thank you.
Kathy Bryan, please.
Good evening, Kathy Bryan, Deltona. Well, one of the reasons none of these things ever got done because nobody up on the dais had the guts to follow through with it, or they had investment and development. So there you go. Let's get it done this time. I keep hearing developers' rights. Why do we pander to developers' rights? If I own property, how come I can't light a fire and have a big bonfire on my property? Oh, well, it could catch on and catch on fire and we could have a wildfire, right? I can't do that. So why do we allow developers, I'm looking at you, but I'm not yelling at you guys. Why do we allow developers to continue to build these high-density areas where it is going to cause the flooding? The rezoning issues is one of the things I think that needs to be addressed very quickly. I agree with a lot of things you guys have said. The other thing to look at is when we build, we talk about traffic, we look here. We need to look here because it affects downstream. And that's increasing accidents and injuries. Again, life safety stuff. So remember all this budget time. All these things that we need to spend money on, and one of the number one things is the infrastructure. We need to combine areas of conservation when we build these areas, and there's no reason you guys can't become more stringent in your code. None whatsoever when it comes to the building types, the landscape code, that type of thing. Let's be more environmentally friendly. I know everybody's idea of beauty is different, but this is not going to be a beautiful city if we keep the way we're going. Let's get and I think we need to start with areas that are already built that need infill. So, infrastructure. Thank you.
Terry Luis.
Terry Konash Louise, and I'm a resident of butting up against Deltona. I see a huge difference in you guys up there, the majority of you, and I appreciate that. I thank you for what you're saying, and now I'm looking for you guys to follow through and make it happen, as we've said. The other change I see is in the meetings that I've gone to with the DRC, they are trying their darndest to tell the developers, we're not going to approve this. Now, whether the developers come back again and try again and again and again, we know that's what they're going to do. But the DRC is doing a great job of buffering it before it even gets to you. We all know infrastructure is a major issue, the water. I buffer right up against Deltona. I flood because of the city of Deltona, and I'm going to be requesting some information in regards to that. The other that I'm looking into is Volusia County Sheriff with the accident reports for Doyle Road. I know Doyle Road is Volusia County, but if the city and the county can work together to improve our roads, it would be much appreciated. And so we are looking for you guys to keep up with what you're saying so that we can move forward. The question came up about why can't we hold developers accountable? If you want to take into consideration and look up the city of Anthem, Arizona and Maricopa County, Del Webb came to Maricopa County and wanted to build all of this subdivision. Maricopa County went back to him and said, that's fine. When you build our schools, you build our fire departments, you build the roads, you build the water treatment plant, and you update I-17, which is the main road. Now there is a beautiful community up there, but Del Webb paid for the majority of the infrastructure. So we need to look at what we can do for those that are building and asking to build to help them or make them accountable for that as well.
Larry French.
Larry French, 2520 Arslan Street, Deltona. I've been talking about development for decades. I only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to have to read fast. I like what I'm hearing, what all you were saying, but it makes me think of an expression my father used to have, poop or get off the pot. Our development, what I'm going to talk about here is basically two things, mapping and land clearing, which some of this touched on. We need to have adherence to that comp code. It has to be, it's been ignored for years. Now we're dealing with the consequences. A lot of the things about what we're hearing and allowing development to do need to be changed, as you're all echoing. We need to recognize that. As far as mapping is concerned, some of the data that was being shown on here was from maps zoning that was 14 years old. So we need to have updated mapping on our city, even with the stuff we're using for the zoning, because the land has been altered so much in the past 40 plus years that you need a new topographic map so you can determine the proper land uses for a lot of this stuff. Developments have changed the elevations. Stormwater runoff patterns have been impacted by this. So your zoning needs to be dependent upon what the land designations are going to allow. So we need to have updated mapping when we're doing these things. Those are essential in moving forward. The other thing is land clearing. When we get into this comp plan, we've got to make the changes because the biggest facet of our development practices is what's really killing us. Why do we continue to bulldoze away every virtual thing that is naturally there that's a part of the land? Like shrubs, trees, and other living plants absorb water. Not only do trees, canopies provide a shade, but they also take in water. Their roots absorb a great deal of water, and various trees and plants consume more water than others. For example, an average maturing tree under optimal conditions can transport up to 10,000 gallons of water. When we eliminate all these naturally occurring water absorption
Thank you,
items,
Jim Pesha.
well, that's it. I'd love to talk.
Jim Pesha, Deltona. I'm going to add this one to my collection. I have one from John. Even Brian Tupkip had one when he tried to turn us into a sports town. Heidi has one. Now I got one from you guys. In 1995, we became a city, and if I remember correctly, our population was around 60,000. Today, almost 100,000. That's over a 50% increase in population. We currently are also simultaneously doing the Teresa Basin flood study. Our land has been altered, as it's been mentioned. This is coming in and it's talking about maximum use of our land. Not the practical use, not the proper use. How can we squeeze the maximum out of it? In 1995, I was told that the city's slogan was neighbors with nature. I moved here because I was told, and from what I saw when I moved here, we were the closest thing to being a city within the country. Now I go up Normandy Road, and all I see is bare land bulldozed. Go down Graves, bare land that's been bulldozed. We have paved over paradise. I talked to my neighbors that said they came here because it's a quiet little city, and it's a neighborly town. I went through Altamont, down 436, 10-lane highway, traffic light every corner, bumper-to-bumper traffic, with everybody in a big hurry to get nowhere fast. Is that the vision for Deltona? I hope not. We have to pay attention. That comp plan, a lot of what you guys said, needs to be done, but the key is doing it. Thank you.
Robin French.
Good evening. I'm Robin French, 2520 Arslan Street, Deltona, a resident of 43 years. We're supposed to be a tree city. I don't see that. Every single time I go on my morning walk, I see another lot cleared. Every single tree gone. Every bush, every shrub. And if you're lucky, they'll plant a palm tree and maybe a crepe myrtle or two. And then they wonder why they're flooding. We need development. We need it right. My husband and I traveled 21 years to Orlando for work because there was no work here on the west side of the county. I spoke with our previous economic development director, Jerry Mays. He said, quote, "We can't tell them what to do with their land." I'm sorry, I thought that's what zoning boards and commissions did. My 1 acre exists on a small pond. At least that's what it was. Now, it didn't touch my house, but the rest of my property is gone. Gone. My fruit trees, my garden, everything gone. And the only reason my house is okay is because my husband's smart and knew what property to pick. I've been working with the city of Deltona since last June. Yes, I said last June, to get the assistance that was promised me. Just got an email yesterday. How about that? Tree City? Not anymore. It's pillage and burn, and literally I've seen them do that on almost a daily basis. It's not the city I wanted to live in. I'm not sure I ever will again.
Tina Swift.
My name is Tina Swift. I live off of Lemon Bluff Road in Osteen. I grew up in Enterprise before Deltona annexed and destroyed a majority of it, and I promise I will never stop saying that. I exist to serve the needs of the community of Osteen, and I serve as the vice chairman of the board of Bike Walk Central Florida. Our organization is highly focused on supporting cities in the development of equitable, alternate, safe forms of transportation like biking, rolling, and strolling. As we've all experienced, Florida, and especially this area of Central Florida, is dangerous by design. Advanced, transformative, modern infrastructure like what is displayed in the lovely PowerPoint deck, those are actually possible, but not without specific documented requirements in our land use, zoning, and minimum requirements. To expand on Commissioner McCool's valid point, strategy eats culture for lunch. Strategy without a clear, tactical, integrated master plan and a method in which to protect the city from developers who are using our own land use and zoning laws against us, that is a recipe for disaster. That leads me to the joint planning agreement. Most of you, probably many of us in the room, were not involved in the JPA and the Osteen local plan, since they play such a significant part in the voices and objections of residents. Every time there is a proposed land use or zoning change, I'll provide an abbreviated timeline to refresh everyone's memory. 2003 and 2004, Deltona annexed over 6,000 acres of property in the Osteen area. 2004 to 2005, at the request of the residents of Osteen, the county challenged some of those annexations. January 2006, the council agreed to drop most of the challenges in exchange for a joint planning process for the Osteen area. Fast forward to 2008, the Osteen Joint Planning Agreement was signed by the city and the county. The JPA dictates that no changes may be made to any properties within the JPA as reflected on the map before current state and future without the agreement of city, county, and Osteen residents.
Tim Blodgett.
Hi, kids. I'd really like this to go well, but I got a couple of questions. That map you have on the left there, that red spot that your legend says is commercial land, I go to barbecues with the people in the neighborhoods that are in that red area. So, did a little poking around, found out it was something that Big John did years ago, in an attempt to increase commercial, stimulate commercial, that area was supposed to be able to knock down those houses and throw those people out. You might want to address that with this. And that's one thing. The other thing is there was mention of a watershed study back in 2010. I just wanted to bring a little bit of update to that. There was a 2017 Teresa Basin study that was done, and after Hurricane Ian, it's pretty sure that the 100-year floodlines are going to change, and there's currently a new study for the Teresa Basin going on, which will probably change all the 100-year watermarks. Other than that, up on your slides there's a T in, what was it? What was that? Regulated. Yeah, there's a T in overregulated. Have a good night.
Albert Bryan.
First thing, last watershed study, Deltona didn't actually participate in the watershed study. They chose not to. And the newest one, they chose not to again. So whose fault's that? Okay. That being said, right now, if you have an acre of land, you can build up to 6 houses on it. By your land code. And there's not much y'all can do about it. So there's one thought of process to this, because the biggest theme I've heard up here tonight from y'all is flooding. So if you have the ability to build up to 6 houses on an acre, you could actually rewrite that with actually not rewriting it and state that you can build 1 or 2 houses per acre. When you go to 3, it's $10,000 extra that you have to pay in. 4, $15,000. 5, $20,000. You get to 6, it's $25,000. And you're going to pay this into an account to buy houses that were flooded during the storms. What do we have, 200? And you've already had to pay for 2, right? So that's one way to do this. Another way, once you get all those houses bought, then you can start buying up conservation land. You want to save land? That's the easiest way to do it. Have the developers buy it for you in a roundabout way. So if they want to build 6 acres per, or 6 houses per acre, make them buy into a conservation plan. This has been brought before you before, and yet this commission has let it go to the wayside year after year after year after year.
That's all, Mayor.
Of Commissioner McCool.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Someone brought up to this, I think maybe it was Robin that brought this up, and I think that Larry was going to allude to this. One of the things that I yell about is developers. We have in our code that there must be so many trees on a property, and here's what happens. They go in and they, without impunity, slash every bit of vegetation and then replant something. Stupidest crap I've heard of in my life. You cannot replant a 50-year-old tree. You just can't do it. And the natural buffers that already occur, we ignore that. Oh, they can do whatever they want with their property. No more. We have natural vegetation established. We have Florida friendly, because it was already there before the developer came in to slash it all down, so it's pretty Florida friendly. That's something that it's one of my pet peeves. Thank you, Robin, I think, for bringing that up. I have screamed about this for 5 years on this. Why are you cutting this up when it's already there? Naturally occurring vegetation, nature automatically puts what needs to be where it is to preserve itself until we interfere. And I just really would like for us to be cognizant moving forward of that and holding people responsible for keeping in that natural state as closely as we can preserve it without truly infringing upon their right to build. So there's that. We also have almost, what, $1 million in our, how much is in our tree fund? Almost $1 million, isn't it? Almost $1 million in our tree fund. Let's get on that post haste to put trees back and build and put trees. We need a plan for that. We have almost $1 million in tree fund money that we have not used, and we need to get on that. Last thing I have, Mr. Mayor, for staff and for this commission, what I would like to do, because this is a recurring theme with us, that we suggest and we bring stuff forward and we have no way to encapsulate or to memorialize or to visually look at what we're doing. And what I would like for us to do as we move along in this process, and I have suggested it before, is we used to have a whiteboard right here in Chambers. And what it had on there were goals that we had, and we proudly were able to cross stuff off as it got done. And I would like for us to reestablish that as we work through this, so that at every meeting that we televise and in these chambers, the commissioners can be prompted to remember as we have all juggling stuff, and that the community can look at, this is what we're working on this month, and be able to cross that off and hold us to accountability for timelines or at least explanation with what's going on. The community wants to be engaged, but we need to include them in that process as we move along, because information is power. Information reduces conspiratorial ideas or wrong ideas or notions, and it's just a really great way to visually see that, hey, we have stated we want to do this, we create the expectation of doing it for our residents, and then we get to cross it off. So I would like for us to re-implement a whiteboard as we move along in this process as a reminder that this is where we were, and this is where we want to go, and this is what we have done to get there. So please bring back, Mr. Mayor, if we just, I know as we move along, but at some juncture here, I would like to get consensus or ask staff to do that, if that's the pleasure of the commission, if we can do that again, please.
Vice Mayor Jody Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. Like I said, I agree with everybody saying everything tonight. And we all touched on the same thing, sort of the people here, the residents, about this. If we're going to follow this, let's actually do something with it and follow it instead of just keep talking over and over and nothing ever's getting done. There's processes like the C1, C2 with the commercial thing. We need to fix all that. I know a business that wants to come in town now, but it's I asked you about it, and you said I have to bring it back to the commission. It's a business wants to come, and it's C2, and I understand a lot of things were designated different business back in the day because there was people that didn't want. You know, if anybody doesn't remember, back in the day when Dareware came to town, there was a couple of religious people up here, and they're fanatic about not having it in town, so that's when the C1, C2, and all that was written, so we can get that all squared away and fix all this stuff. We need to fix a lot of this stuff. But I hope we can get it done sooner than later, because now if developers and everything hear us talking about changing it, or they're not going to be able to cram 1,000 houses on 10 acres of land, if we don't get it done quick, they're going to come and get their paperwork in, apply, and then we're going to be held to them applying for it. So we need to do this not 5 years later, not talk about it for 2 years like we talked about chickens. We need to get this done quick. Yeah, you know, I brought up the chickens. Nah, I had to. Sorry, Jim. But we need to get this done sooner than later. Because like I said, they're going to all apply. If they're afraid we're going to change stuff, and once it's on the books, then they have a lawsuit. But we need to start doing this stuff. We've been talking about doing stuff, and it seems like infrastructure and everything else seems to be put on a wayside, and we need to get it done instead of just talking about it. Thank you.
City manager comments?
I have none.
All right. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene at 7:45, correct?